It's operating out of our awareness. What can we possibly do to change it? I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh for Local Now. Can we talk about implicit bias? What is it? And what can we do about it? We'd all like to believe that we are conscious and aware of everything we say and everything we do, that we plan it out carefully. Unfortunately, most of our behaviors come from a place of implicit bias. So implicit, it basically means it's out of our awareness. It's implied in some way. We're unconscious about where it comes from. Bias means having an aversion or a preference to a certain person or a group of people. So implicit bias can mean having racist underthoughts and turning towards people who are most like us instead of others in all kinds of ways in life. So how does implicit bias form? It forms in society from many messages that we get from the media. So if there are a lot of crime shows, for instance, that show people of color as the perpetrators of those crimes, you might grow up to have an implicit bias that says, Black people are more likely to be criminals. But it may not be true. It may just be the way that you absorb some of those messages. And now they're out of your awareness, even though you know you're not racist. You know you don't mean to ever intentionally be prejudiced against somebody or discriminate in some way, but the implicit bias lurks there. Here's an example. Let's say when you were a small kid, before your memory, even when you were less than 1 year old, you got bit by a big dog and were traumatized. Of course, you don't remember it, but do you know that you don't own a dog now? And when you see people who treat their dogs like their children, you kind of have negative opinions about that. And when people don't have their dogs on a leash, you get really angry. Did you ever notice that maybe you even drive faster past pet stores? All this is possible. So what you have to understand is most of our behavior comes from a place of unconscious motivations and implicit bias. This matters in so many ways, especially during these times. There's been so much research to show that people who have a higher implicit bias against Black people are more likely to categorize a non-weapon as a weapon. Say it's a cell phone, maybe it's a wallet, maybe it's a comb or hairbrush. And in fact, in virtual simulation studies, they've shown that those people are more likely to actually shoot at a person of color carrying a wallet or a comb. Okay, so now that we know that many of us have our own implicit bias, it's operating out of our awareness, what can we possibly do to change it? Well, the first thing we really need to do as a culture and society is to change the media's depiction of people of color or people of various genders. So if you're raised and you're only watching TV shows where the bad guy is always a person of color, then that starts to embed an implicit bias. So we have to make sure that we hold our creators accountable and let them know that CEOs can and are Black, billionaires are Black, that women run corporations, that women are in law enforcement, and that criminals can sometimes be white housewives, like me. So this is how we change our implicit bias, by creating diversity in all the media messages out there. The other way is to change the ways institutions operate in, say, their hiring practices. Could you imagine if you could take all the names and genders and maybe even zip codes off every resume? If you could do interviews by email without seeing a person. I know that many orchestras in the world have now started to do their auditions where the musician sits behind a panel and they cannot see her. And they've created more diversity in our orchestras just because of that. So think about it. How can you make hiring practices more fair? What can you do to reduce your own implicit bias? Now, if you have a very strong backbone, I have a recommendation for you. If you Google the words Harvard Implicit Bias Test, There's a test online that helps you discover your unconscious beliefs. It works like this. Your thumb hits one green button for good, another green button for bad, and they mix in a whole bunch of words, good or bad words, like disgust, joy, education, love, happiness, murder, and you have to hit good or bad. What is your instinct about that word? Except they also mix in very quick black and white faces. And you've got to go as fast as you can and click good or bad. Yeah, you have to kind of click on a disclaimer before you begin the thing, because for many people, the news will be shocking. I think we all need to take the Harvard Implicit Bias test so that you yourself can find out what you need to work on. What's in your unconscious that's driving the car of you around life? I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh. Thanks for watching on Local Now. You can find me anywhere on my social media at Dr. Wendy Walsh.